Progress is often defined by the obstacles we overcome. Today, it's not enough to overcome obstacles. We also have to make choices. We must stop and consider how we will move into the future. And we must look at the tools we'll use to get there. Familiar objects, things we use every day. Comfortable, predictable, useful, friendly. You use them without thinking about how or why. It's automatic. You're always in control. But when it comes to computers, things haven't been simple enough. Until now. Presenting the future, brought to you now by IBM. It's IBM's Common User Access interface, and it will change your world.
Sure, Dave. As a matter of fact, I've already updated the specs with the information you sent. We can use the same materials we used last year. Yeah, if the metal analysis report is okay. I think it just came in from the coast. Let me check.
With the CUA workplace, you're always in control.
This is it.
This engineer has just received a document from another office across the country.
Oh, Ray says he's sorry about the delay. Yeah. You need a copy?
He can send the document to a colleague just by dragging it to the appropriate outbasket.
Okay,
Now,
it's
they
on
both
its
can
way
examine the
right
document.
now.
If you can see it, you can use it.
An object always behaves the same way
It looks very good.
when it's out
Better
by
than I
itself
thought.
on the
Now
workplace,
to make the
or
manufacturing
even when
guys
it's
happy.
placed inside another object.
Let's go home.
Information typically isn't used as an individual item. It's typically used in terms of relationships with other information.
Well, that's right. That's just it. I mean, the benefits of object orientation is that users no longer have to worry about starting up applications in order to perform their tasks. They see the objects and they want to act on them, and they just do it. For example, they take a letter and they take it to an out basket or an in basket.
I'm really looking forward to that because I'm really tired of having to type addresses on, you know, when you're using old character-based systems. You have to type in the name of the guy you want to send it to and all this stuff. Now you can just make an out basket and customize it so that everything you put in there goes to them or to a group of people. And you just start dropping stuff on it and it just goes.
More than just that, though, is just being able to open up an object, and I don't have to care who started it, who created it. Somebody can just send me something, and I can open it up, and everything's there. I don't have to say, oh, I have to open up this application, oh, I have to open up this one, and to merge them, I've got to open up this one and then put everything in there. That's...
You know, I keep coming back to the power of this interface is derived from the concreteness of the object approach. Users deal with objects that they're familiar with. So it hides the computer-oriented aspects of the interface and lets users deal with objects that they're familiar with. They're in familiar territory at all times.
Another advantage is that when you do drag, for example, a chart into an object that contains text, it doesn't lose its chartness. It's still a chart. It's not an image of a chart, but it's got all the functionality associated with the chart right there.
So you can change it there. You don't have to go back to wherever you created it.
Right.
Yeah, like the guy with those metallurgy results, right? I mean, there's still a set of results and tables and charts all to do with that stuff, and He just knows when he puts it on that document, that report, it's going to go in there. It's still going to be what he needs.
Once you've got that kind of interaction, what becomes even more important then is, in fact, telling the user, as well as the fact of supporting something that he did worked, is actually telling them that it did. So the whole business of notification or feedback becomes much more important. So when something arrived in the mail basket, notification that you've got some mail. When you drop something somewhere else, notification that yes, it worked, it fitted in seamlessly, and it seems to be going to work fine.
In fact, you don't even have to wait until you've completed an action in order to get that feedback. As you're dragging things around, the different objects will tell you what the result will be if you choose to drop it there.
Right. But a little more subtle than we're usually subjected to today. You know, remember the count going up by 1 on the out basket and then going down again to say when sent.
Oh, hi, Brian.
Hi.
I'm glad you're here. I wanted you to take a look at this for me. Now, the client has approved the concept of all 3 of these ads with just a few changes. But the main thing is he didn't like the headline. So why don't you sit down,
But
toss around a few ideas, and see what you come up with. But remember, the new headline must fit the TV commercial.
okay.
Now, everything you need is right there in the computer. I'm sorry, but I've got to run and catch a flight.
Wait, I've never done this before.
Oh, you'll do fine.
The CUA workplace lets you focus on function and productivity rather than on tools and applications. Help is always available according to your needs.
Okay, let's see what works.
Go for it.
Everything is an object, and objects communicate. Not a hint of dealing with an operating system or application. There's no need to worry about where objects come from or how they were made or where they are stored, remotely or on your own workstation.
Got it.
If the data is in the system, you can get it in any of its forms whenever you need it.
Yes.
Go ahead. Explore. If you make a mistake, it's easy to recover.
Now, how about that TV?
Familiar objects. Just use them.
Presenting the car that will change the way America drives. A car with more major new innovations than any other new car ever.
I think the designer shows one of the most exciting, to me, aspects of this user interface, which we call reflections on the technical level. And it's this idea where you can have an object in more than one place and they have them all change when you make a change to one of them.
Sure, because it's really the same object, isn't it? It's just
Right.
2 visual representations of that object.
That's
I mean, the user is going to want to be able to get at a particular object, perhaps in a multitude of places inside their system. Why should they be forced to always going back to the same location in order to get that object? And the structure of this is really very simple in that users don't have to keep in mind what was the original object, because all of the visual representations are equivalent in our system.
I mean, the cross-referencing is a real-world situation. It says, you know, I've got several indexes into my filing cabinet, and I go and find a document here. And when I make a change there, it's actually reflected out here. What we've been able to do is realize it a little bit more easily.
This is something you can't do in the real world because when you've got a physical document, it can only be in one place. But in the computer environment, that document can sort of be in multiple places.
I think that's an important point to make in that while we're trying to have the computer environment reflect the real world, we don't want to limit users to only those capabilities that exist in the real world, because then why are they using computers? So we're like taking the best of the real world and adding all the functionality and capabilities that the computer can provide. It's like the best of everything.
With the objects that we saw, though, we saw that all 3 changed together, and that's really the designer's expressing to her assistant the intent that these 3 things stay in sync. She made those all reflections of the same object so that they would change in sync. Now, you change the advertisement and you change the title on a page, but you also changed an overlay that was being put on top of a video to cause a title.
Somebody has gone, some specialist developer has gone out and provided the technical code will handle video for us and wrapped around these very complicated adapters that'll deal with tape and CD-ROM and so on, and has been able to deliver it and produce it for us in such a way that the person who did the work on specialized text forms with fonts and shapes and fill colors and so on could actually integrate the two, and then neither of them could predict that that interaction would have happened.
But a user would expect it.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm checking it for you now. I'm looking at everything I got. Now, Mr. Jones, my ships are full. We can't squeeze another one on. Not even a subcompact. Not another boat in Chicago. Unless, of course, you want to send them to Singapore. Don't worry, I'll check the trains and find another way to send these babies.
There's no need to keep the customers waiting.
I got a contact. Let me see what she can do. Sarah, it's Joe. I need to ship 180 cars to New York tomorrow. Help!
Okay, Karen, I've added the new routing information to all the bills of lading, and each customer will get a note with the same information. I'm sending those to the printer now. Oh, sure. I can group all the information together for you and just put it in your folder.
Familiar tools become new tools.
Karen, can you hold a sec? I've got another inquiry here. I'll bet you Joe's got a full ship again.
Sarah, it's Joe. I need to ship 180 cars to New York tomorrow. Help!
Did you hear that? Poor Joe. Let me just send him a short note to say...
Move information. Move ideas. The computer won't get in your way.
I love free trade.
The dispatcher goes from one task to another without changing applications and without being concerned about window management.
Stick around for the return trip, right? Oh, sure, it's no problem. As long as you don't keep them too long.
Thank you, Sarah. 100 tons of sheer automotive beauty will soon be in your hands. Don't scratch the merchandise.
And really what helps even more, what reinforces that, is all the objects the user is manipulating are objects that they understand. They're not objects that they had to learn because they're using a computer. There's no programs. They're just objects from the real world represented on the screen.
And we had a lot of windows to organize. You need them to come up together, to go down together, not to keep swapping them around just because some designer felt that their window was important at one point. Let's keep them where they are. Let the user decide when he moves things around.
Like we saw on the screen, there were 2 different tasks, and the windows are associated with those tasks.
So going back and forth from one task to another could possibly involve managing all those different windows from one task to another. It's just taking their emphasis, taking their attention from the task at hand to managing the computer. That's not something we want to do. So I think the approach we've taken, that is using work areas to control the opening and closing of windows that it's associated with a particular task, is just great. It's just a boon.
If you're working on a certain task and one of the windows in that task is currently active, you're working in it, you can still go pick up an icon from the other task and move it around without having to switch focus to that window. So the computer doesn't try to assume what you're trying to do.
Different windows won't pop up to the front just as a result of using something that's contained in the window.
The other point was to look at the sharing of information, because sharing of information can be very natural. I mean, most people don't think about just asking someone a question as sharing of information, but it really is. And there's no reason not to take a simple case like that and use it as the model for all sharing of information.
I think in the past, some people have been very proud of actually implementing a database. So they're going to show you this database is in Cleveland, and if you have to go to Cleveland to get it. And the whole point here is you surface information and user objects, and they're packaged up in such a way that they're organized the way you feel like dealing with them.
I mean, that was one of the neat benefits of separating selection and direct manipulation on a 2-button mouse, is the ability to use and develop new selection techniques, such as the swipe selection that the dispatcher used. She had some objects that were located in an irregular pattern, yet she didn't have to use a complicated keyboard technique for selecting all of them. Just all with the mouse in one really smooth flow. And again, that was a direct result of that separation, which was a lot of fun developing.
For us as deliverers of an architecture, though, it leads to not only should the architecture be well thought through so that we can consider usages like these dispatchers, but also that basic elements, core elements that set examples of behavior and basically set the standards, really have to be implemented in the systems we deliver. So your fundamental raw materials are there, and they behave in such a way that you're encouraged to say, when I add this new one, I'll do it just the way they did it because it was consistent and it worked.
You have a good example of how things should work.
Yeah. You encourage rather than enforce.
Another reason why there are standard CUA objects.
Right.
Sales, Jack Barnes. Hi, Mrs. Olson. How are you? Yeah. Listen, I appreciate you calling me back. Now, you wanted the red convertible with AM, FM, air, and a 5-speed, right? Good. Well, I think I've got you. Okay, right. Go ahead. No, it happens all the time, believe me. You're allowed to change your mind. Okay. No convertible, you would rather have a hard top. That's no problem. Let me look it up right now. As we speak. Well, now, I don't have it on the main lot, but I can check the affiliates. One of them is going to have it. I guarantee it.
Explore.
Yeah.
Try new avenues.
Let's see. Now, would you consider a sunroof? Yeah. It's in the same model, Arizona red with a sunroof. I can have it here within an hour.
The salesman creates a link between Mrs. Olson and her new car choice.
Now, we have several different colors in that model. Well, when you get here...
He then opens the calendar and drags the customer object to 3 o'clock to make the appointment.
Okay. Yeah, I know your car. I sold you that car, remember? Okay. Okay. Well, now what I'm going to do is work up the figures on the Arizona red.
Next, he sends the customer object to the business office by dragging and dropping it onto the accounting out basket.
And I'll see you at 3 o'clock. Thanks again for calling. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Changed her mind again, huh? Don't worry. We'll be ready if she wants to buy it today.
The change made to the customer object by the salesman is immediately available to the financial officer. She is simply working with a different view of the customer, tailored to her needs. This is an example of the reuse of objects across business processes.
And a down payment wouldn't hurt. Right. Bye.
Uh-huh. 3:30 today? Phew, I don't know.
A computer workplace that works like you think, now and in the future.
All right, you're lucky today. I think Phil can handle this. Yeah, well, that's what Phil gets for being a fast worker.
Using familiar workplace objects, you can search databases, create and connect objects, view remotely located advanced media, and communicate new information.
4:30. How's that for service?
It's almost invisible, yet always there.
A compact disc player? I don't know. I'll have to check and see if I've got one in stock for that model.
With a CUA workplace, you are always in control, more efficient and more satisfied.
I think we can still get her on the road by 4:30 with the CD player. Right. Yeah, no problem. You owe me. Thanks. Phil, here's the CD player for your 3:30. Thanks.
Okay.
And the notion that you can take search and apply it to different objects, like we applied it to 2 different car lots, and keep the search criteria but change what you're searching is important. Most applications today won't do that.
That's all being enabled by object orientation.
The objects can answer a certain set of questions about themselves, and therefore you can connect an object into what you could describe as a socket. You know, this object can answer these 5 questions, therefore it will fit with this other object which wants to ask those 5 questions.
We also saw that happen when the salesperson dragged the car over to the worksheet. These objects might not have ever been aware of each other before, so to speak, but the worksheet has certain needs, and the worksheet can then query the car, do you have this information, and if so, please, please provide it.
We saw a lot of things knitted together, and we're going to have to expect that. We're going to see things that were not prepared or built specifically to interact with each other being used that way. So we see the car going from the worksheet, going over to the scheduling, being put in somebody's schedule of work. And so these things, which really, I guess conceivably could have been predicted, but it's likely that more and more new
uses for existing information are going to be dreamed up all the time. So we see some of our developers doing prototyping work where they start building individual objects and making sure that simply that they respond to certain general price protocols, but not trying to predict how they'll be used. Suddenly they find things they hadn't predicted would be used together, being used together, and sometimes strange and very satisfyingly predictable effects occurring.
Relationships are particular to individual organizations and users' needs to access them in different combinations. Now, traditionally, we've used containment, such as folders in the physical world, to establish some relationships for finding information. But containment is too rigid, it's fixed, and we can't change it as easily as we need to, and we need to represent a lot of different relationships. And the linking of objects together to exchange information is key to providing that flexibility.
And we're seeing here that this user interface can be expanded, be walking around out in the service bays, doing inventory, doing a lot of things that are not traditionally thought of as being right for this kind of user interface.
You know, for computer technology to be fully exploited, we're going to have to allow people to just walk up to kiosks or information pedestals, if you will, and be able to access vast arrays of information.
The user might walk up and do some query of what automobiles and selections are available, as well as financing terms and so forth themselves, without burdening the salesperson initially.
We've seen someone designing a car, we've seen someone making the advertisements about the car, we've seen them shipping the car and now selling the car and servicing the car. And that can be a cross-enterprise use of objects. Look forward to a world where we can get agreement such that everybody in the car industry can pass cars from one to another and not have to each have their own separate system, one back in the manufacturers and one in the advertising agency and one in the dealership, because typically they're all separate enterprises.
And this is a far healthier kind of perspective to have for computer specialists to have of the industry, where they start talking about the things people deal with rather than the things that they deal with.
We're likely to see changes in the interface from what we know as the CUA interface today, but it'll be consistent with respect to the concepts and the paradigms that users have learned with existing mechanisms.
And more people are working where two or three people may be working on the same piece of information and deal with the user interface issues that someone else may be changing the underlying data that you're working on, and exactly how you recognize that, how you communicate changes to them, how you take corrective action, how you undo perhaps a change that someone else made, and all the social issues.
Today we talk about CUA as a user interface for the office, and we're beginning to talk about it as the user interface for all work-connected things. But there really isn't any reason not to carry most of the same user interface along with you to the games business, to the entertainment business, to the controlling your cable TV at home and all of those video recorders that no one can ever quite figure out how to record the show they really want it on. There's no reason why you shouldn't have a CUA-based user interface on your TV set to control all of those things.
I'm looking forward to the day where I have a credit card, and on this credit card magnetically is stored some information: who I am, where my workplace is, and maybe a few more bits of information. And I go to different places like shopping malls, I go to an airport, and I insert this card. And as a result of inserting this card, I essentially have my workplace in front of me that I can start working with.
But it'll really expand when, just as a matter of course, people can go in and write term papers by looking at the Britannica or the Groliers Encyclopedia online. They can listen to music, they can do shopping, and this whole vast array of services becomes available more conveniently there than any other.
At IBM, we have a vision of the future, and we're ready for it now.